So, hi, this is Patrick Chalmers talking to Yoram Gat. This is our inaugural video call of Democracy Talk. And we're going to start this by finding out a little bit more about Yoram, who he is, what he does, and why he is interesting for innovations in democracy. So, Yoram, you're the co-founder or founder even of the blog site Equality by Lot. Just let's start by talking about what that blog is about and why you've done it.
Okay, hi Patrick. It's great to do this finally.
Yeah.
So Equality by Lot is a group blog. We bill ourselves as the blog of the Clarotarians, which are people that are interested in promoting the use of sortition of lots, of drawing lots in political life. It started. So I think it started in the beginning of the end of 2009, beginning of 2010, and the Clarotarians was a group that already existed as some sort of a mailing list, and I contacted Peter Stone, who was one of the members of this group, and suggested that we could do something that would be. I think my inspiration was something called Crooked Timber, which is at least was at that time I was reading it a group blog of economists, and I thought that we could do something similar for sortition, for people interested in promoting sortition. So that's kind of the genesis of Equality by Lot, and yeah, that's basically the idea. The idea is sortition. At least how I see it, it's there would be of course various shades of this idea among the people that are participating in the blog, either as posters or as readers. And as I see it, sortition is a competitor for elections. It's a way to.
Let me just interrupt you just a second there, Yoram. So I'm today acting as Mr. or Ms. General Public Global Citizen. Okay, so you've used a couple of terms which I want to just chew on for, let's say, our respective grandmothers. So you've used the term sortition and you've used the term Clarotarian. So for our respective grandmothers, in fact, for my respective grandmothers, may she rest in peace. But if you were explaining something to an intelligent, ordinary citizen, what do you mean by sortition? What is the Clarotarian? And let's break that down into sort of, street language, as it were, global street language.
Okay, so sortition is a method for selecting political representatives. Again, just it's it could be thought of as something that fulfills to some extent the same function that elections do in society as we know it. And the idea is to take the entire population, maybe your rolls of registered voters, or the entire population, people that could register to be voters, the citizens basically in a country, and instead of saying to them, go on a certain day and go to the polling station and select who should be your representative or ruler or a political officer for a while, instead of that, you tell them, we'll take all of your names, put them in a big box, and we'll pull out some of those names at random, and those people will be the representatives, will be the political decision makers, people that will carry political power. That's the general idea. That's kind of the mechanism of sortition.
Okay, so what you and the other people on the list in 2009, you knew about the theory of sortition and the ideas and the inspirations from ancient Greek times of sortition. You were collectively interested in this, and you launched a blog. We're now sort of 7 years later. There's a couple of things in there for me. One is that I would like to know where you came from personally to be interested in this rather than conventional elections. And the second element is, in those 7 years, how have things changed? So two questions.
Okay. Possibly the second one is a bit shorter to describe. I think actually there has been some sort of a accelerating interest in sortition, I believe. I think it's it's nowhere near any a kind of a household term sortition, and it's not a mainstream political idea. It's probably not even very well discussed even among professionals and activists. But I think it is gaining some interest and traction, and there is more and more discussion of this idea in various forms. We can go into that, right now, or as we, in the sequels to this episode, to this meeting. But I think there is, there have, even before then, it's not, it's been this accelerating or this mounting interest in sortition has been coming around, at least as far as I know, since the 80s, the 1980s. But it's been, I think, much more noticeable in the last few years, and it's of course not because of equality by lot, but equality by lot, if anything, is a symptom of this. Is a symptom of this increasing interest, and maybe that's part of the process. But I don't think it's been a major cause. If anything, it's an effect.
Okay, well, that's a nice answer for the second question, Yoram. Tell us about you, and how is it that you came to what is still this sort of niche thinking about possible political solutions? Who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? What was your sort of political evolution that brought you to think that sortition would be better than what most people know about democracy, inverted commas, which is to have, elections? So how did you evolve to 2009, and where are you now?
Yes. Okay. So I grew up in Israel, and I believed everything that the conventional wisdom about democracy, meaning that it has a lot of, it has kind of an amorphous definition in in civics classes and in public discourse. But I think it's very, very clear that the essential ingredient, an essential ingredient, and maybe the only essential ingredient, is elections. Free and fair elections. And I believe that. I was completely uncritical about that. And I think, and I was rather politically involved, politically aware. I kind of volunteered in political campaigns since a relatively young age.
What sort of things were you doing?
I was, I kind of joined the youth section of an Israeli political party when I was a teenager, and we were handing out pamphlets during election time, and the standard things. And I think you know, it's kind of, it was a gradual process of this of, you know, coming to doubt, you know, what I knew and what everybody around me knew.
There wasn't one sort of breakthrough moment when you thought this system sucks, we're going to do something different.
No, there was no single moment. Um, the kind of the crucial years, or the time where I actually kind of made the transition was in the early 2000s. It was, I think, maybe the crucial moment for me, and maybe for other people. I think there is relatively, I mean, not in the context of sortition, but in the context of having a great disillusionment with the existing system, was, I think, with the Iraq War, when not only was it um, you know, decided upon and acted upon by the at the time, by the way, I was living in the US. Not only was it undertaken by the Bush administration, but also supported by the Democratic Party, and also by the mass media.
Did you join any anti-war marches in the US when you were there? You know,
I don't. No, I didn't. I was against the war. I thought, you know, I thought it was, you know, kind of being propagandized, you know, ridiculously or obviously at the time. But I didn't. I wasn't. I wasn't. I didn't actually act on it and become part of the movement. There was a significant anti-war movement at the time, or I don't know if you call it movement, because it didn't last for a long time, but a lot of expression, and I was aware of that. But I think, you know, I can't say that I really remember, but in terms of the timeline, it certainly fits with the time that I felt that this is not working, that clearly, I think at the time also I was reading, maybe because of that I started reading online. I think that was the time when things started appearing online, that there was something started being the blogosphere. And I started reading, and I discovered stuff that, you know, I kind of considered myself a Democrat. Not, I was never a registered Democrat, but I voted Democrat. And I discovered that, you know, the Clinton administration, for example, did a lot of things that I disagreed with. So I kind of realized that, you know, there really wasn't that much of a choice, and that things didn't work as advertised. And you know, to some extent, all of this is a reconstruction. I don't really remember that well, but you know, apparently that's how things were set in motion. I remember being very upset about the treatment in media. At the time, I was an avid listener to NPR. That's National Public Radio in the US. That's considered the kind of the you know, elite media in a way, right? It's not corporate media. It's media that takes itself very seriously, supposedly, and is not biased by you know, commercial needs or considerations, supposedly, and so on and so on. I believed all of that at the time, and I went through a process of disillusionment, and I started looking for alternatives. And I don't remember how or why I hit upon the idea of sortition, essentially, of using a sample of the population instead of elections.
yeah.
To some extent, it may be because I'm by profession, I'm a statistician, a computer programmer and a statistician, and maybe that was it. But initially, it just seemed to me like an interesting idea, but I didn't really think of that this could be you know, a real alternative. I think it took me months before. So I kind of had this idea. I thought, wow, that was cool, and put it aside. And it took me months to come back to it and say to myself, wow, this is really something.
Yeah. And you said there that you were not a registered Democrat, but you were a voting Democrat.
Yeah.
What do you think, just to bring that conversation forward to today? You're not in the States at the moment, so I presume you're not voting in the presidentials. But what would you think about today's presidential campaign? I mean, there's still a Clinton on the ballot, but it's a different one. And how does that relate to your evolved thinking about sortition versus elections?
Well, I'm a Sanders supporter. Again, I'm not voting or anything, but I actually even contributed to his campaign. I actually did that way. I was a Sanders supporter way before he was a presidential candidate. I was aware of his activities even when he wasn't, before he was a senator. He was a representative from Vermont, and I somehow, I was reading the, whatever, The Nation or whatever, wherever it is that I heard about him, and I remember being interested in him, and I think I even contributed to his campaign when he was making the transition from the House of Representatives to the Senate.
Okay.
But I consider him an extreme exception to the electoral rule. So even though I am a Sanders supporter, I think that even if he does manage to become influential through the well, he already did become influential through the electoral system, but even if he does become even a president, I don't think this is a systemic solution. I think this is some sort of a fluke of an exception that sometimes happens, and sometimes you manage to get someone who is who does represent the public interest, but in general, the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes of this world are much more the typical product of the electoral system, and they represent what is now called the 1%, the elite.
Yeah. So it's interesting to get you talking about Sanders, and we're in April. There's still a couple of months probably for the nomination process to continue. Then we've got the election in November. What about you're now back in Israel? What do you personally wish for with regard to sortition as it starts to infiltrate the conventional political process? Would you expect to see something happen in Israel or in the United States, or are there other countries where you think that sortition is beginning to gain ground? Where do you hope for change to come?
Well, I think the sortition has made the gained the most ground in the French-speaking world, specifically in France and in Belgium. In France, there is a very prominent activist named Etienne Chouard, who promotes this idea. I don't see everything eye to eye with him, but he's clearly a very good man and has interesting ideas. And he is a sortition supporter. In Belgium, the idea has actually been floated. The idea of switching one of the chambers to sortition instead of election has actually been floated by relatively high-ranking politicians. So, unfortunately, I don't read French, or very little. So it's hard for me to follow. But from what I understand, sortition has made much more progress in France and Belgium than in the English-speaking world. So if anything, I'd expect maybe more progress to be made there. But I don't have very specific ideas of how it's going to happen. It's a very radical idea, and it's likely to take a long time. I'm not, I'd be happy if I see significant progress in my lifetime. It's not something that I'm expecting to happen within the next couple of years.
Okay, so that's very realistic. Bringing us back to equality by lot, then, I've been reading it, I suppose, sporadically for maybe the last 12 months. And I've also, with having met you over the internet, and also just via other people as well through Democracy in Practice, for example, in Bolivia. And I see sort of very specialist discussions about the practicalities and how it might be implemented. What are your ambitions for equality by lot and for the way that discussion could evolve and get a wider pool of people? And how would you like to see equality by lot go forward?
I'd like to see, equality by lot or any other vehicle become a center for sortition activism, not just discussions, which are interesting to me and many others, I think, but actually to make some impact, to find ways to organize and push for sortition in any way. I mean, I think clearly the first step is to make people aware of the idea. I think currently it's it's just some sort of a fringe idea, mainly because it's unknown. Maybe you could you can make the analogy to Bernie Sanders, how he was in a year ago, where I think only clearly less than 10% were even aware that he existed. And once people heard about him, many people liked what he had to say. I think the same would be true for sortition. Currently, people are just not aware of the idea. When they do hear about the idea, it's a very radical, different, unusual idea, and there is a certain understandable initial suspicion and doubt about this idea. But I think once it becomes more of a more known and widely discussed, I think people will see the sense that it makes, and then once it becomes it becomes part of the public discussion, then we can move forward toward putting pressure towards implementation, because clearly the existing elite, electoral elite, will not like this idea. It would involve taking political power from the existing political elite and giving it to the people, right? That's democratizing society. But the idea is clearly first to have the idea well known enough so that the mounting political pressure, popular political pressure on the existing structure can be would be something that is plausible.
Okay, listen, Yoram, I think that's great for today. I think we've had a visit around equality by lot. We've had a little bit of the Yoram backstory as well, which I think is always useful for people to understand, how on earth have you come to this? And for me, I think we've done a really nice sort of first edition of Democracy Talk video. And I think we can leave it there. So thank you for your answers, and thank you to our audience for listening and watching.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for your questions. And I guess next time we'll do something a bit different. Maybe I'll ask you about what you do and how you came to be what you are.
Well,
yeah. So see you, and until next time.
Good stuff. And given that it is a visual medium we have here, this is what we will be talking about maybe next time. This is how I came to being interested in sortition and such things. So that's Fraudcast News: How Bad Journalism Supports Our Bogus Democracies. So maybe we can talk about that next time. And that's not to do a naked publicity, because it's a free PDF. But it's really in this spirit of explaining to ordinary people how ordinary people become dissatisfied with electoral politics. I think that's what it boils down to. So thanks very much, Yoram, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay.
Cheers.